when we talked before, I had created this thumbnail by vidIQ, which is this really great program. And I'm just really starting to unlock the power of it. It's not cheap being a podcaster. There's all these services you have to pay for. In vidIQ, I initially said, I gave it a photo of you and I said, make it a cage match. And every version of it had either you had the gold belt or you had my head in the ropes or you were kicking me out of it. I was like, why is the AI always making Andy win these? This is not fair. I'm just kidding, but it did come up with a really good one there. But you can feed it these ideas and AI will riff off of them, but you get the most out of it if you're giving it some native images to work with.
Yeah.
The lady yesterday. And I think the version I have is about 60 a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, podcast, a lot of different things. Being a Zoom user, that's 159 a year. What software are you using to do the actual streaming and recording?
So I record everything off OBS, Open Broadcast Software, and I do my conversations via Google Meets, which is not as good as Zoom. I've come to learn this, but because I use Gmail and I use Google Drive, it's one of those things where the package I pay for includes everything and it's helpful. Everything's all, and I've just upgraded to actually have my own custom business domain, which sounds fancier than it is, but yeah, might just have to take the plunge into Zoom to go past the 40-minute free package. But yeah, as for AI stuff, I like the sound of IQ because talking about the thumbnail, I really liked it. I liked how it turned out. I don't think it aged me too well, but at the same time, I liked the pose, the sleeves rolled up. It looked the part for the type of conversation that we're going to have. And yeah, I think it might have aged me about 10 years in the face.
It's hilarious. I didn't notice. I will say this, you can't be a podcaster and be self-conscious. That was actually one of my questions, Andy. I was the youngest of four. Normally that kid's a little bit of a show off, but I was very socially inept. I was awkward. I was a latchkey kid, so I wasn't around a lot of people. If I was to bump into somebody I was in primary school with and told them I was a podcaster and they hadn't seen me since then, they'd be absolutely floored. Now, were you the class clown? Were you always charismatic? Were you the shy guy? Was this a big leap for you to get on camera?
Honestly, it's a bit of all of the above, to be honest. Whenever similarly enough, I was the third of four, all boys in our house. And I was always had to be the center of attention because I was always doing something. I was always either cracking jokes or whatever it may be. And I always kind of got into a lot of confrontations, we'll say. I was very confrontational, short-tempered as a kid. Then as I kind of got older into high school years, I was more or less a bit of a class clown type thing. Really weird, misguided sense of humor, I guess you could say. Then it was as it got, I think I regressed over time. So then I kind of got to the point where I would have been very shy to go out and do this. It would have the opposite of what I was when I was growing up. And I think I just began to enjoy my own space and my particular friend groups and everything. Becoming a podcaster was the full circle moment from when I was a lot younger. I don't think anybody could have ever predicted I would have gotten into doing something like this because I don't think I ever really gave anybody a reason to think that I could have. I never even thought myself, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm glad you brought. Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I was just gonna say it was one of those things where people just knew me for who I was, but they never knew this side of me, and I don't think I did either.
Hidden talents, hidden skills sometimes. And I tell people, I've got some friends with smaller children, and I said, you have no idea what skills your kids may have until you try to unlock it. And there's skills in the last, I'll give you a very brief example. So I hated doing shorts. When I started, and I want to get into the evolution of your podcast because you and I made changes. What we ended up doing as podcasters is different than how we started. So I obviously started long form business interviews. I resisted. I don't think I'd cut shorts, which shorts were already wildly popular. But I don't think in the first 6 months of these one-on-one interviews, which I did one every week, it took me 6 months before I started cutting the shorts. And the early shorts were terrible. But recently, because I'm a music fanatic, and I still don't enjoy editing videos and I don't enjoy making the shorts, but I realized I enjoy applying the music to a short. So
Yeah.
what I'm doing now is I found a way to do it that makes it exciting for me. So obviously the shorts are always the guest, you speaking, and I'm going to cut it even in this video. You're going to make a paragraph and I'm going to cut it and it's going to match the music. And if you watch some of the shorts of the last couple of weeks, and I'm not saying I'm great at it, this is a new thing I'm learning because I'm really enjoying it. As you're making your points, the beats and the sounds are landing right as you're making the point. So here I am in my head, I'm Scorsese, because Scorsese, of all directors, really understands cinematics and sound coming together.
Mm.
So I found a way to enjoy something that I didn't normally like. Now, when you started your podcast, is it this current channel or did you have something else? In other words, what was let's start with this. What was the first time you went on camera that went on YouTube or out to a social platform?
So it went even before I started a podcast altogether. So it would have been July 2023. I decided to start live streaming gaming content on Twitch. And this was something that had been coming for a couple of months before I started to meet people, like-minded people who were into the same kind of gaming content. And I was like, you know, I think I want to maybe invest some time, a little bit of money into doing this. And worst case, if it doesn't work out, I have all the equipment that I can use for other reasons. So it was a low risk, high reward kind of thing. And so I started doing that. And then as my network started to grow a little bit, I met a friend of mine and we used to collaborate quite frequently. And a lot of people in our shared viewership would have always said to us, like, you guys have great chemistry. I wish you guys would collab more often. So I was like, I just turned and was like, and this is the stereotype of a typical white guy in his late 20s. It's like, do you want to start a podcast kind of thing? And him and I, we were just like, yeah, let's do it. Why not? So we started our own podcast and he was busy with work and he became a games developer around this time. So he
Oh,
was kind of
wow.
busy with the preliminary stages of that. And all I had was just outside of this was just my day job, and that was fine. So I wrote and produced this podcast with him, and we would have done
Wow.
it every 2 weeks.
Now, how did you do
And
that? Let me stop you there for a second, Andy, so to help people with the nuts and bolts. Did you sit at a table and at the same table with him and come up with ideas, or you were writing storyboarding? What was your process?
so we had a very brief conversation as to what we wanted it to be about.
Mhm.
And it was very much, he gave me free rein to do it because he was too busy. And it was okay. So I was right. Here's a general idea. Are you happy for me to go with something like this? So we ended up landing on, we wanted to keep it within the game circle because that was our niche. That's what we were known for. So it just made sense. But I didn't want it to be something that was very cookie cutter, the same thing as you would have found in any other podcast. And so I was okay, well, how about then I'll give you a list of topics and we can break it down and we'll improvise and talk about things. And he was like, yeah, do that. So I gave him a list of different topics and we were like, okay, this can be our blueprint for the first 4 episodes, for example.
Was it ambitious? You guys going for just for views? You were thinking a monetization strategy, or was it just for fun? What was on your mind from the
It was
beginning?
just for fun, really. At that point, it was just for fun because people had said that we had great chemistry and they enjoyed what it was. So we were thinking, well, we enjoy doing that too. So let's give back in a sense and do something we enjoy and that everyone else knows and everyone else we know enjoys. And then it's a mutually good time for everybody. Then we fell into the age-old statistic podcast and we never got past episode 4. And it was like, okay, that was fine. He went off to become a games developer and he's doing a great job at that. At the same time, I had caught the bug. I had felt like a bit of a surge in confidence in terms of what I was doing. It was like felt like I held my own, having a conversation on camera, even though I had live streamed for a year at this point. I still found myself. It was a different thing I was doing. We were still doing it live, doing the podcast live. And I know I can talk to people, but whenever the focus is solely on me and what I'm saying and other people, that's different. So there was that was something I had to take into consideration. But after the 4 episodes that we did, I set the bug for it and go back even further. This is actually something that comes up quite a lot for me. Is back whenever I was a teenager, I remember being out with a friend of mine, and I was big into talk shows at that point in time. And I just made a passing comment one day talking to a friend, and I was like, you know, it's mad how all these people that were walking past us here, they probably all have their stories, but who is really ever gonna? This person here could have absolutely lived, but who's really gonna know unless somebody asks? So that was a passing comment I made back when I was 15 or 16 or something like that, maybe even younger. And then 30 years old, it became a full circle moment where I said to myself, right, I've got the bug for podcasting. I have like a network of streamers who I've met over the year at the time that I've been doing this. So why not take that philosophy and be like, okay, there's a lot of people who know all these other streamers that I know. Why not get to know them just a little bit better? I'll interview these people, and then that way, everyone has this more of a feeling of closeness to all these people that they spend and invest a lot of time watching on a regular basis. So that was where behind the camera, how that was incepted.
And so that's so now we're talking about the YouTube version of the show. Is that correct?
So this was actually I still did this live on Twitch, and
Oh,
this
on
is
Twitch.
actually, I didn't implement this into YouTube until it must have been the last 6 months. It was one of those, I massively slept on YouTube as a platform, and I think I was more focused on Spotify, Apple, and all those
Sure.
other streaming platforms. That when it got to the point where now me putting everything up on YouTube was, it was, as we say here in Ireland, it was a handling because
I love it. Let me interrupt for a second because
yeah,
everybody may not know the technology. So
of course,
so I started day one as a video podcaster. So YouTube was going to be my platform of choice. And then later, about 6 months in, when I started cutting the shorts, I realized, oh, there's this thing called RSS, which means really simple syndication. It even ended up in my book once I figured out that it existed and what it was, and you can do so many things with it. So for me, I did it exactly backwards, Andy. I shot on YouTube and then streamed that information into RSS, and then RSS sent it to Spotify. And what's really great about RSS, just to let the audience know, if there's any potential podcasters out there, that after you do some initial setup, it can potentially send your episodes automatically to, once you upload them to RSS, it gets then simulcasted to Spotify, I think Audible, Amazon. It's a lot. It saves you a lot of time. You still have to recreate some of the basics of the episode in RSS. And you can also schedule them in the future, just like you can for YouTube. And I don't know, I haven't looked at the statistics lately, Andy, but I would presume that audio only podcasts are probably the vast majority. As a matter of fact, there are podcasters that get angry if you say you have a podcast and you shoot video. There's some purists, because podcasts have technically been around a lot longer than people realize. Now, true or false? Quick ambush question. If you could, would you get in a time machine and go back and start your podcast in 2019, where if you had a cell phone camera, you could make $100,000 a year? During the big health crisis, anybody that had a podcast got rich. You remember when everybody was getting rich during the lockdowns because
yeah, that's a
nobody
good
could
point.
go anywhere and everybody was spending 20 hours a day on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, like back whenever being a content creator it was a lot more accessible. I don't think I would. I
Oh,
don't think I
wow.
would because I like what I have now and I like what I've done with it. And I feel like if I was to have started this back at 25 years old, I don't think it would have been anywhere near what it has
Interesting.
turned into, to be quite
Interesting.
honest with you. Just I think on a personal level there, my life in 2019 was an entirely different thing than what it is
Okay.
now in the entirety of the 2020s, to be honest. I like to think that, I know you say 100K, and 100K is a life-changing amount of money, but I like to think it all happened when it was supposed to, and
Sure.
the way it's kind of going is the way it's supposed to. So that's the sort of, I take a lot of comfort in kind of feeling that way about it. You know what I mean?
And of course, you can't judge someone, your numbers on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, which is another big one, might be vastly different because I've had people come to me and they were like, Robert, I'm thinking about going on this guy or this lady's podcast, but they've only got, 2 subscribers on YouTube or whatever. And I'm like, they're probably not. I said, are they audio only? Yeah. I said, well, and then we'd look and they're huge on Apple Podcasts, great ratings, lots of
Yeah.
downloads, because ultimately, and of course you and I are in the same position, when we choose a guest or when a host chooses us, they're making a decision based on whether they like us or the data. Or, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share this, but you and I are both members of Podmatch, and I do bring them up
Yeah.
quite often because I think it's again, it's another expense, but it helps you. It's a lot easier than trying to scare up guests off Facebook, which is what I was
No,
doing
of
before. And there's
course.
some great groups on Facebook. I don't want to knock them, but Podmatch has a system. It's designed for hosts to find guests and vice versa. But I had pitched a guy to be on his podcast, and this guy, I've got pretty thick skin. and I can't even say what he said to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was a little shocked. So he just didn't think I was a fit for his show. And he's been a podcaster for a number of years. He's about 10 years older than me. So I was really shocked at his response. He could have just said, "You're not a fit," but he must have really been saving up a lot of frustration because I've been frustrated. I had a guest not show up, I think it was 2 days ago. And I
Oh,
can
wow.
tell you, I've not had a guest not show up in a year and a half, and I shot every week for a year. Now, one guy
Yeah.
didn't show up for a pre-show way back when I was doing pre-shows, but thankfully, as a business podcaster, I don't run into that very much. Now, if I was doing an art podcast, which I love the art community, I've worked with them over the years, but I know they're chronically late. They might not show. But this was a business guy, and he burned me on the day of the podcast. So after that happens a few times, and I'm sure you can confirm, you do start to get a little pickier about guests. What goes through your mind when you're looking at a potential guest on Podmatch or on socials?
It's funny enough you asked this because I was thinking about this quite recently, and I've found myself in the very fortuitous position where more people are reaching out to me than I am reaching out to become a guest on my show. That's something that I never even considered this to be a thing when I started. The basis of my podcast, I leave it incredibly open-ended in terms of it's about storytelling. And now there is this angle about it being people within creativity or creative arts, but it can be absolutely anything because entrepreneurs are a very good fit as well because always a good story with entrepreneurs about how they got into where they are because with entrepreneurs there is it was never the first thing they got into, never the second, the third, fourth, or even fifth. There was always a bit of a ladder in terms of how they got to where they are. I think pitch as well is a very important thing. That's something that's really occurred to me lately when people email me or message me on Podmatch and it's just, okay, I think I'd be a good fit for your show, XYZ. And I look at it and be like, yeah, sounds pretty good. There's a lot of talking points. There's a lot of, and the good thing as well about Podmatch is, as a side note, is you can see what other podcast people have been on. So you can really kind of get a good idea as to what they're going to be like as a guest. And I think that's very important because also know this that when you do interview people, as an interviewer, you have the biggest job at times of getting the story out of people sometimes because not everybody's a fantastic talker. Some people are just shy and some people are still maybe early in their sort of being a journey of being a guest on a podcast. I know when I started, I was not the best guest at all. In a sense, you have to sell, but the pitch is important because you'd be like, okay, this is what I can bring to your viewers. Then, as an interviewer, you'll go and do your own sort of primary research in terms of what can we talk about that they haven't necessarily mentioned, but is in the public domain, etc., etc. Whenever I'm like reaching out to people, it's sort of it's very dependent because there are times I might just be scrolling through IMDb or social media like Twitter or Instagram, and I think, oh, okay, yeah, let's give this a go. It's
I've
very
I've
spur of the moment, spontaneous.
I've pitched a few people that I never thought would come on, way outside of like one guy. One that really floored me was Robin Spinell.
Uh,
He's as far as guitar YouTubers, this guy is one of the biggest. He did these mega sessions where he's busking on the street up in Canada and he's shooting video for 3 or 4 hours and he's in a not a rough neighborhood, but it's a high transit area. So he constantly gets assaulted and has all these crazy things happen to him. And not that he likes it, but he likes the attention. He obviously wants people
yeah,
to watch him play guitar and he supports himself. And I don't know too many musicians now that can truly say that they're full-time musicians, but he's a full-time musician between his Patreon and his other things. So obviously there's a monetization there. Would you agree with the statement that if someone is starting a podcast as a source of revenue, they should not?
it depends on what you've done outside of that, for example. That's what I would say because I think anybody can start a podcast, but if you don't have any experience in podcasting, you don't have any experience in media or anything like that, start a podcast because you want to, but also still make sure that you as a person are secure. Because if you just decide, let's say, you worked a random 9 to 5 or any kind of run of the mill 9 to 5 for 15, 20 years, and you decide one day, it's like, do you know what? I'm going to pack this in and I'm going to start a podcast. Then you're you're more likely destined to fail because you don't know what goes into it. You know, you need to do the work and everything like that. You might have the work ethic, but I think you need to give it a go first and then forecast it for the period of 12 to 18 months and think, okay, is this going to go? Because longevity of a podcast is entirely down to the host. So if you're 100% self-produced, you are in control of how long you produce your podcast for. But you need to look at it in terms of, okay, what are my numbers? What are the chances of monetization? Because monetization is something that you really, really, really need to work for. You need to put that
Sure.
investment in to get it back. I'm not monetized in pretty much anything that I do online at the moment because I haven't looked into it, looked into what I need to do to get there. But I think if you're starting a podcast with no experience just for monetization purposes, then just take the first half of that, start the podcast, go
Right.
for it. But if you're doing it for the money, have a rethink about it. If you're an actor or something, or if you've got a well,
I'm
you,
laughing because I shot a video that's I said if you're gorgeous, if you're attractive, and I actually I really spill the beans. I'm really honest because the worst thing I can do, Andy, is to give somebody false hope. So I'm
Mm,
always trying to encourage people. So I'm like you. I tell people just get started because
yeah,
whatever your topic is, your show, it's probably going to change. Your format's going to change. Your camera might change. Your mic may change. And I did to tap into something that you said earlier. I did like you did that I bought for the podcast was other than the video element of it was the same equipment I needed to narrate my audiobook. So I could
yeah,
justify that what we would say here is a tax deduction, that investment, because it was dual purpose. I realized the book was a business and the podcast was a hobby. But to get into monetization for a second for people not familiar, I think for the what we would call the classic version of YouTube monetization. I think it's 1,000 subs. You have to meet both of these criteria. I think it's 1,000 subscribers and then 4,000 hours of watch time within 365 days, something like that. It's
yeah.
so the 1,000 is actually easier than the watch time. Not that it's easy, but most people say that
Oh,
it's
yeah.
easier to get the subs, so the subscribers. But also too, even if you're not trying to get monetized through YouTube, that's just one way. So let's say you have like every time you shoot a video, you guarantee you got 60 people that show up and they're going to watch it and they're going to watch your episode all the way through to the end. And you have a product like a book, for instance, and that podcast is pushing that book. Like on Amazon, I tell people there's two ways you can make money as an author, not just through the sales of your book, but you can also be on the Amazon affiliate program. So if you go to this, because it'll be in this video, if it's not already in the description, if you buy my book through that link, I not only get my 60% commission off the cover price from Amazon, that's also my Amazon affiliate link. So I'll get a little tiny affiliate commission on top of that. So I'm really making two commissions off of one sale. So that's one way. And then my first ever episode, I had a sponsor and I would have kept that going. But unfortunately, excuse me, the gentleman that I hired to do the editing, I think it took him 3 weeks to finish my first episode, and he knew that the time was of the essence. So I lost my had a sponsor and lost him because of
Mhm.
the editor. But lessons learned. I kind of started a little too ambitious and got my hand slapped, and it wasn't important. But there's all those different ways. There's monetization through YouTube. You could sell affiliate products. You could have your own product, and you could have sponsorship. And there's 10 more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's a lot of ways, even for low views, low viewer count, low subscriber count, people can still make fantastic money as if you're talking to a niche. Now, am I safe in the assumption that you and I both, we really don't have niches because we talk to a very broad group of people. So that's a little tougher for us to gain an audience. Would you agree with that?
I think so to a degree. Yeah, absolutely. Because when you look at the sort of grand scheme of things, there are many, many interview-based podcasts. And you kind of really then need to look into the sort of basis of it. So yourself, you have a business-based podcast. Mine is more creative storytelling. I can't really fully define it because it's just storytelling. You look into sort of what the sort of basis of it is, who the type of guests are, who is coming on the podcast and things like that. Interview-based podcasts, as much as they are quite common, I think they are also fruitful as well because I think everybody is always looking to hear people's stories, no matter what their sort of background is. Let's say you and I both had a mutual guest on our shows. I think that kind of is mutually beneficial because people want to hear, okay, he was on behind the camera. Let's see if what he says is any different on the Free Time Mastermind. That kind of way. I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, maybe a little bit idyllic, but I genuinely think that with interview style podcasts, there is an infinite scope, even if there is a lot of overlap between shows.
If you're right, if somebody's a subject matter expert, I try to soak because I love getting information and new things. Getting back to monetization, you had this point where you started on Twitch and then it became a much more, not that Twitch isn't serious, because I know people are making really good money on that,
Mm.
but it evolved, it changed. And then now you found yourself in a position of a writer. So you're adding writer to your resume, not just
Yeah.
podcaster, which is exactly what I did. To make sure I get this out there before I forget, one of the biggest reasons I just had to have you on the channel is because when I was on your channel, I think your questions, the way you phrased them and the way you conversed with me was better than any. And I, sorry to anybody who's watching this that was a host. I just really love the way you ask questions and you made me think in a way that other people don't, even on a personal level in my friend circle. And I thought I got to get this guy on because I want to know, is it, do you think, before I get into my next topic, which is your book, do you think it's the way you research the questions? Do you think it's native to your person? Where do you think that comes from? I realize you might not be aware of that until just now, but you ask really great questions and you got some very unusual responses from me. So when I look back, I had to watch that interview again. I thought, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing.
Well, thank you, first of all. That honestly means a lot because I went into this with no interviewing experience whatsoever. I just did research, asked questions based on that, and I developed my interview style. So just for context there. The way I ask questions, I wouldn't say that I ask them in a specific way or that there's that purpose because something that I notice whenever I look back on when I ask questions is they will be very long-winded at times because I think in a sense I'm asking particular questions. There are there's a certain depth I want to go into in terms of what it is that I'm asking. I feel sometimes if I'm asking something, it's a little bit too risky of it coming across as a very general question versus, okay, well, if I ask this question, then go a little bit deeper into context as to what I'm either looking for or what I just think this answer the question deserves, or the question that deserves, but I don't know. I think I've always been a little bit of an overthinker in that sense. So I just really want to make sure, I guess, that I'm being understood in terms of what I'm asking and that it's relevant and that it comes across the way it does. I've gotten, and I've had other people, particularly on Podmatch, really compliment my interview style. Honestly, it means the world. But I honestly couldn't say that I have a specific style, more so that I look at the notes that I have based on my research that I'll have on the screen and utilize active listening. And then I'll just be, okay, you mentioned this, so can you tell us more about this, but also this in relation to it. It just, my mind's a spider web at times. Like it just is going in
That's
all different kinds of directions. And
I was thinking about that because I thought if I watch it again, I'll figure it out because there's like, but I think you were pulling at narrative threads. If I had to just like gut reaction, what was going on that was different in that interview? Because I've been on interviews where the guys and Robert, your neighbor says you're a really good guy. Is that true? And the way, and it's funny because we all know that's bad, but there are people that have been podcasting for 10 years. I want to look, I want to be so much better a year from now than I am right now. And I want to be better than that. I want to keep going. And I learned the hard way. And I feel, and I see it in the numbers. I see it in the viewers that we have right now. It works better when you get right into it. So I don't do long intros anymore. I don't say Andy was born in a young age. Not one of that. So I pull the story out during the dialogue, or sometimes we don't get to that at all, and sometimes it's not relevant to the story. If somebody is on the podcast to discuss a traumatic event at a particular part of their life, their childhood might not be germane to the conversation. Yeah, I think your cleverness was in the active listening, and I think you were pulling on narrative threads because the thing that was so great about the interview is there was no interruption of flow. And when somebody's stopping to think about the question, formulating, or they, particularly us men, women are brilliant at it, but us guys, we can't multitask to save our lives. And when a guy, the moment the guy looks at a piece of paper and he's checking to see if he asked that question or not, it's like trying to, it wrecks the rhythm of the interview. And we had a very, hopefully people will go back and watch it. We use the collaborator function. So both of us
Yeah.
get credit for that. I think if the people watching now or watching later want to see a good interviewer, watch Andy's podcast with me, and he's got other great ones too. He's got a lot of great, if you like audio only, he's got a bunch of those as well. So what was the genesis, not of the idea? Did you first think I need to write a book, or did you have this subject that you wanted to get out of yourself? Just that genesis moment. Where did that come from?
I've interviewed a lot of people who've written nonfiction, and whether it be a memoir or something just about what they do, for example, yourself and a few others as well, name a few. And it was one of those midnight thoughts that I had, just lying in bed thinking, I think I just come off an interview with somebody and we are talking about their book, and I was, this could be an idea. I feel I could do this because I have a lot to talk about based on what I've learned and what I've got out of podcasting in the time. I think it was August maybe or something that I started that the idea came, and within a couple of days I had the everything conceptualized. I was ready to start writing. I was okay, I need to do blueprint of what I want to write about. I
Okay.
knew that
So
I wanted to.
similar to the podcast, right? Because you did do some pre-play, which a lot of people don't do that. I guess what I'm trying to emphasize to the audience, Andy, is you conceptualize and you organize ideas. So
Mhm.
did you sit down and try to at first write out as much as you can and just dump the can out, or did you have just singular words, or did you go with singular sentences? In other words, when you laid that first brick, what
Mhm.
did that look like?
So it's actually funny that you put it that way because a lot of authors who I've spoke to, it's just as many authors say this as ones who disagree with it, but a lot of people I've interviewed before have said, if you have an idea, write it down on the page and just keep on going until you don't have any more. And I like that because I did end up doing that, but I wanted to have the structure of it first. So ultimately, where I started was okay, I want to go from the beginning. So a lot of people will know the story of me when I started streaming to podcasting to where I am today. They'll know it for what they see, for what I allow to get out there. And a lot of the stuff we've talked about is probably a lot of people will know, a lot of people won't know at the same time, but the book was a lot more into that. So the first thing that I thought was, okay, I want to lay out the story from whenever I first hit press record on doing the podcast to where I am today. And I wasn't ending it at a certain time. It was okay, well, there's only so far I can go with the story as long as I make the chapters appropriate to this point onwards. We're in the same place where we are, or we were maybe a few months ago when I was writing it. I got to that point, so I was like, okay, the story is out there, start to finish in terms of everything learned. And then it goes on to more of a lessons learned thing where I'm thinking, okay, here are a few topics to talk about. So it talks about the last chapter of the story, for example, is when I make the decision to stop live streaming my gaming content because I absolutely loved that. It was a huge part of my life at the time. I had to make the decision to stop doing that to focus on the podcast, to give that more attention that I think it deserved and what actually was more fulfilling to me. So that's like the middle of the book, one of the heavier chapters. But that's the end of the story because to me, it's at that point where as soon as I went full time with the podcast, in terms of my online life, it was, I can't really write more about that because it's okay, well, then I had this guest, and I had this guest, and I had this guest. So then after the story part of it finishes, it moves on to things like the momentum, riding the wave of momentum, for example, dealing with burnout, what responsibilities that we will face as interviewers in terms of our guests, sensibilities, the use of content, things like that. A few other things as well. So it's a bit of a hybrid almost in terms of when you look at a memoir to this is a story, this is what I've learned.
And the book's finished, Andy, or it's about to be finished? Because I understand it was a pretty late stage. Quite a bit had been put down.
Yes, so the first draft is finished. I'm currently going through the editing process right now. I'm more than confident that I have a release date for it as well. So it's going to be released on the 5th of March. I'm fully confident of that. I'm in the editing stage at the moment. And also, I had a, because we actually talked about this whenever you were on my show, the size of the book in terms of the dimensions. And because I don't have the proof copy with me, I did order it and it did come, but I went for the 9 by 6.
Oh,
And
all right. So tell us about that. Yeah, I know.
oh
I
man.
know what that looks like on your desk. I'll bet you I've got a picture in my head.
Oh.
But paint the picture for the audience.
Okay, so it was just for a bit of context for those watching and listening right now. So, whenever you are releasing a book through Amazon, you can pick the size of the book, and it goes from anything from pocket sized right up until I think the biggest is 9 inches by 6 inches.
And
And
this
it
is
does,
to give some context. This is 8.5 by 5.5. So yours is a little bit bigger
that,
than that.
and yeah, exactly, right. But also, one thing that I learned that you have to take into consideration is the length of your book to warrant the size of it.
I don't mean to
So,
laugh. I'm sorry.
no, of course, no, listen, because it is one of those things that I think is it's important to get out there. It's important to acknowledge because the first thing that I thought when I opened the package that came, the first thing I thought was, this looks like a mini textbook. It looked like a mini textbook versus or something that could have you wouldn't have really picked out of a lineup or anything like that. And I was all right, okay. So then I got onto ChatGPT and I was look at the state of this. You look at the state of this. This is ridiculous. So I've opted. So as of now, this could possibly change. I've opted to go for the 8 by 5 because I wanted
Yeah,
to come
it's a good
across a
one.
little bit more like a novel thing. I would
Sure.
go for 8.5 by 5.5, but I don't think I have the I don't think I have the pages for it just yet. But yeah, so
And I'm not ignoring you. I'm getting a
no.
page count here. So there's actually more pages than this because I have an unnumbered addendum in the back. But
Hmm.
the actual content, the chapters, it's 150 pages and then maybe an extra 15 pages. Now, the
Yep.
reason why this size is because this is the hardcover, obviously. And text size matters. Text size is going to affect how it's pages and then the
Yep.
size of your text. But I wanted a spine large enough that I could print the title on. Now,
Yeah.
that was ego for me, honestly, Andy, because I don't think my book's going to be in a retail store anytime soon. And that's the only reason why the spine matters. It was an ego thing for me because it's going to be on somebody's shelf. I wanted to have the
Well,
title. If
exactly.
it's not there,
Yeah.
I had to kind of squat mine down and make sure that it had adequate enough pages. And it's even more challenging on the paperbacks. On the paperback, the title it's on there. I don't know if it's true for you too, but formatting, I hate to say it was harder than writing the book, but wrestling with Amazon the first time, especially when I did my Kindle, because I converted my thing from Word to PDF and got it on KDP by Amazon, and that the print version looked good. And then I just uploaded the same thing to do a Kindle, and then the Kindle formatting is, and now I'm having a panic attack all over again with how that is. So,
Oh
are you going to
wow.
do the digital version or just the print version for yours?
I print and digital. Eventually look towards audiobook, but that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing altogether. Because I remember you mentioning to me about because if I remember correctly, the way you said it was like, I don't mean to scare you, but look out for the formatting and it might just go. I had that issue, but with the actual cover of the book because I sort of learned the
I don't
hard way.
mean to laugh. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
but it's
I had
one
to
of
go
those
get
things.
counseling, brother. I had to go.
The
I'm like a Siri. I need to talk to a friend. Chat GPT, which
yeah.
I call Eva. I'm like, help me.
Man, I think I was up till about 2, 3 in the morning trying to sort this because I wanted to get it. Once I started doing it, I wanted to continue on with it, right? So I got to the point where I did up the cover, I did that in Canva, had everything all the same color scheme as my logo and my branding and everything. So I think it looks pretty good. But then had that and I was okay. The dimensions seem okay, this, that, and the other. Saved it, uploaded it to KDP, and all you could see was just a QR code that I had put at the back of the book. And I was like, okay, that's definitely about 2% of the entire cover that I've put up. So there was a lot of work going into the formatting in terms of you can't resize them, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You cannot resize them when they are uploaded. It will take it as face value as to what it is that you're uploading, whether that's your manuscript or your cover. So that was a fun lesson. So I had to do a lot of chopping and changing there. I still do now that I'm changing the size. And but with the manuscript itself, I didn't find that there was the issues that were in my head based on what you told me because I have everything's all sitting as a draft right now, currently in KDP. Obviously, it's still to be amended, but I found that, especially with the Kindle edition, that there was no dramas whatsoever
Oh,
because
thank goodness.
I had to really mess around with the margin size on the paperback manuscript,
Hmm.
but with the Kindle, it seemed to automatically format that to that size from what I remember. I say this now, when I go back to doing this again with the updated manuscripts, I'm probably going to have an absolute nightmare because I got away with it the first time, but we'll see. Yeah, thankfully I didn't have the only lessons learned were literally everything that you're uploading has to be as it's going to be printed, and auto formatting is not a thing. Amazon KDP takes absolutely no prisoners.
Yes, it's very cut and dry. Now we're blessed to be in a time where I remember what publishing was like 20, 30 years ago, and printers were pulled by mules and it was very complicated. And now you upload it theoretically if you have, it could be that easy. And I just finished yesterday, I uploaded the audiobook. So that's done and that's for
Oh,
sale now.
brilliant.
So the first edition audiobook was up there, but now the second edition is up there. And that's a lot easier. The audio has to meet certain qualifications, but you don't have
Yeah.
to worry about formatting because it's not visual. But what I will tell you, Andy, and I encourage you, look, I know we're both podcasters and we don't have time to watch other people's podcasts, but the young lady, Shanti, that I had on yesterday, she's 18. She's published 22 books. She
Wow.
knows more about publishing at 18 than I'll ever know the rest of my life, no matter how many books. And we talked about covers and money and who she uses and contract. We really knew she had a lot of experience. So we got in the weeds and she knew it all. She clearly handles all of her own business at 18. And she published when she was in sixth grade the first time. So you could tell, I guess in Germany, they'd call her a Wunderkind. She's a definitely super talented. So that's worth watching because we spend a lot of time about making sure that the cover looks good because that's really when people go to Amazon, that's the number one thing. It's like a dating app. You're going to look at their face and then maybe the other stuff. So definitely that's the book cover is the face of the dating app. But your podcast, Behind the Camera with AndyGames, is that where you want people to primarily look for you or and when do you think we can get a copy of your book? When's the official launch date?
Yeah, so behind the camera with Andy Games, that's what I am on most socials, really, to be honest. In terms of when you look at the handles for Twitch, TikTok, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, it's different, but all under, if you search behind the camera with Andy Games, it'll come up, thankfully. That's the with Andy Games part. As much as I want to get rid of it or phase it out, it's pivotal to SEO for me
That's
anyway.
my
Like,
brand. That's my brand. Yeah, I can see
it's
you got a guest coming in for you, and you're like, this guy, he's off brand. We can't have it. Someday, when those big podcasters, they have to worry about silly things that, thank God, we just have on who we want. We still
yeah,
have this. We should revel in it. I know people are like, oh, I don't have enough subscribers. I don't have. Yes, but you have freedom. You have freedom. You can do
exactly.
whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. You don't have to worry about a sponsor walking away. And biggest thing I would say, especially people that want to write, whether fiction or nonfiction, and whether they want a podcast, a book and a podcast is a platform. A platform just means a word, used to mean a word of something that you would stand on and be able to speak. And it gives you a voice. And there's a lot of forces in the world and not all of them are good. And having a platform gives you the ability to share your opinion and your perspective in the world. And somebody might be hungry to hear, oh yeah, Andy, what he went through, I went through the same
Yeah,
thing and you can bring light to somebody's life. So I think having a platform as a person is very important. I think it's really kind of part of a healthy democracy is having conversations and yeah,
absolutely.
I feel very privileged to have you on. What date did you say your prospective date to have the book for sale so we can buy it up?
Well, first of all, thank you for all the kind words as well, because that's everything you said there embodies why I do this as well, because it's given that platform to people who might not necessarily either have had the chance to do it before or just has a story wants to share. The book, yes, the book is due to arrive with us on the 5th of March, so 2 months today. That I have cemented that in, so then I know for a fact that it's
Hell,
gonna be out that day. I'm gonna have to just get the rest of it all done, but we're close. We're close. Aim is to have the editing all finished by the middle to end of this month, and then the final 5 or 6 weeks to just tighten up all of the edges, make sure that it's all going to be pretty ready to go. The March, that is the day.
Fantastic. Well, when we want to make sure something happens, and I'm sure you use the same phrase there, but we say come hell or high water. In other words, no matter what happens,
Exactly.
is there a regional phrase that you have that's similar, or do you say the same thing?
Rain or shine would probably be the closest thing. Yeah, hell or high water. I think we would say that as well. I don't think there's anything particularly colloquial that we would say outside of that.
Where I'm from, we would also say, more specifically regionally, we would say, if the creek don't rise. That's our kind of our local phrase. If the creek don't rise, it's going to happen. I'll leave you with that, Andy. Thank you so much. Were there any questions you wish I had asked? And I appreciate you being so generous with your time because we went way over.
Oh no, not at all. That's the sort of sometimes when a conversation goes over the allotted time, there's always good reason, I think. No, honestly, I think we've covered a lot, and I think we've definitely it's been a very, very amazing conversation for me. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you as it always is. So thank you for your time as well. I really do appreciate you having me on.
The pleasure is mine, Andy.